reinvestment theory. Now, reinvestment theory is when you're put under pressure that you move back to a earlier stage of learning. I can give you an example that's not sport related. Let's say you're driving a car. When you drive a car and you're learning to drive a car, you're very conscious of every single move that you are making in the car that you're trying to drive. You're aware of where your hand is on the steering wheel, on the gear stick, everything. But as you start to learn to drive, and as you then end up passing your test and you become a driver that's been driving for, say, 10 years, you don't even think about driving. There's so many parts of that that you don't think about. But let's say then you go into a car park and you're trying to park the car, but suddenly an 18-wheeler is up behind you and beeping at you. A guy in there is getting angry and asking you to do this as quickly as you can. There's a chance that you now are starting to think about what you're going to do in order to park that car where your hand is on the steering wheel. And sometimes that's where people get flustered. Essentially, what's happening is you've moved from this very automated and automatic stage of learning to then a very novice stage where it's clunky, you're very conscious and aware of your movements. And that's ultimately what you're doing. You're becoming super conscious of the processes that you're doing. So the idea is that when we're automatic and things are running smoothly, you're not thinking about it. You're not really consciously aware of what you're doing. And that's great because it looks effortless. But then when you are under pressure and you're really conscious of those movements, it can really be detrimental to performance because you're just so aware of everything that you're doing and you're not able to do that fluid, automated movement. So that's a real quick sort of intro into reinvestment theory. If you're interested in it, you can go look it up. It's a really common form of impact under pressure and a lack of performance under pressure. I have felt it before. I feel it in many different levels, and I have fallen ill of it for sure. So, what is there a solution to if this is perhaps happening to you? Well, ultimately, a really common way of being able to overcome this is what is called a holistic process goal. And this is essentially where you might hear an athlete say a phrase to themselves, which ultimately reminds them of the technical cues that they need to do in order to perform that skill. So if you were to break down, I don't know, a free throw in basketball, and there are so many different aspects to putting that ball into the basket, technically, that is. So where your arm needs to be, the positioning, the height that you need to throw it, all the different parts of the mechanics and the technical areas in that skill that make that up. And not only that, what you do as an individual to get the result. But when we're in the moment and when we're under pressure, we don't want to be thinking about all that. We want to be making sure that that process, that shot just happens really smoothly and we're not having to do much thinking at all. So the way that we overcome that is that you take the technical cues, the technical wordings that you are using, the phrases that you're doing in training, and then you ultimately distill it down to one word that when you say it, your mind remembers what all of those cues are. So it could be something like smooth, long, short, whatever it might be. It'd be a specific cue to you that will allow you to do that. I know I had one when I was playing professional cricket. I had one which was tall. And that just literally told me to stay nice and tall. But with that, it was my shoulders would go back. I would be pumping my arms. There was so much that was under that one word that would just allow me to do it. So when I was under pressure, I just knew what to do. So I knew what to say. Or it might be something like where my eyes need to go, where I need to be looking. And I might say one word, which is just a reminder of where I need to be focusing my attention onto, rather than trying to remember all these different areas that I might have to focus on. And you add that into a performance routine and you can add it into your training so you can practice it and play around with different words and see the ones that perhaps work best. That's where I always encourage you to perform under pressure in training so that you know whether it works or it doesn't and you find them. But ultimately, that word for you is going to be really individual. It's going to be one that comes from your training, comes from your skills, comes from your process, comes from whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And it's going to be something that's not complicated and that you remember everything that is underneath that technical cue. and you'll remember it under pressure.